welcome you watching News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. On the show, we have some breaking news coming in from Russia. Well, the Russia-Ukraine war is now in its 15th month and today saw a massive escalation in the ongoing conflict. Was there an assassination attempt on Russian President Vladimir Putin? That is the very serious charge that's been leveled by the Kremlin. It has accused Ukraine of attempting to kill President Putin. Moscow claims it shot down 2 drones which were used in the alleged attack. Visuals emanating from the Kremlin show the dome of the Kremlin, the seat of Russian power, engulfed in fire after the alleged drone attack. Russia's reaction was swift. It has termed the incident a planned terrorist attack and an attempt on the life of the President of the Russian Federation. Russia says it reserves the right to retaliate. The remark is a possible indication that Moscow could use the alleged attack to justify a further escalation in its war on Ukraine. In fact, some reports suggest the Russian parliament wants the Kremlin to launch an attack on Ukrainian President Zelensky's residence. Now, Vladimir Putin remains unharmed. He has not been injured. In fact, the Kremlin itself has confirmed that the president was not on the premises at the time of the attack and no major damage to the Kremlin building has been reported. Unconfirmed reports say Putin, for now, will work from a bunker in Moscow. In fact, in a statement, the Kremlin has said, and I quote, 2 unmanned vehicles were aimed at the Kremlin. The devices were disabled by special services using electronic radar assets. The Russian president was not on the premises at the time of the attempted drone attack. A video circulating on Russian social media shows a plume of smoke rising behind the main Kremlin palace in the World Citadel. Another video shows one of the drones right above the dome of the presidential palace being shot down by Russia. Moscow's mayor has announced a ban on unauthorized drone flights over the Russian capital. In a statement, Mayor Sergei Sobyanin has said drone flights would be prohibited unless a special permit has been obtained from government authorities. He has said the ban is meant to prevent unauthorized drone flights that could obstruct the work of law enforcement. The Kremlin has also said the 9th May Victory Day parade would go ahead in Moscow even after this incident. Victory Day is a key anniversary for President Putin. Now, in the past, 2 Russian energy and military facilities have been hit in different attacks since the invasion of Ukraine began on the 24th of February 2022. Of course, Moscow terms it a special military operation and not a war. On past occasions, Kiev has not taken official responsibility for such attacks, but often made cryptic or sarcastic comments welcoming the attacks. Today, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said this year will be a decisive one for a victory in Ukraine. The question is, was this indeed an assassination attempt on President Putin? Is Kiev behind the alleged attack? Is this the most serious escalation yet in the 14-month-old Ukraine war? Could we see the war take a turn for the worse in the days ahead? Could Russia launch a major retaliatory attack on Ukraine? What does this development mean for the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war, given the constant nuclear threat that hangs over the region and indeed the entire world? Those are some of the questions we will try and get you answers to in the course of this show. Before we go across to our guests, we have one more update coming in. Ukraine has denied being involved in this alleged drone attack. Ukraine has issued a statement saying that Russia is preparing for a large-scale attack. Ukraine wages an exclusively defensive war and does not attack targets on the territory of the Russian Federation. So Kiev issues a denial. Russia is convinced this was a terrorist attack and an assassination plot to kill President Putin launched by Kiev, and they are now threatening retaliatory action. What does this mean? Let's throw this open to our panel of experts. Joining me on the show, Ambassador Ashok Sajanhar, former diplomat, Major General Bishambar Dayal, defense expert, and Group Captain V.N. Jha, also defense expert. Ambassador Ashok Sajanhar, let me start with you, sir. Of course, as usually is the case in a fog of war, there are claims and counterclaims. We don't know the exact truth of what went down at the Kremlin. What we do know is that according to the Kremlin, there was a drone attack on that building. There were 2 drones that were used, and it was nothing but a terrorist attack according to Moscow and an assassination attempt on President Vladimir Putin, charges that Ukraine has denied. Now, whichever way this goes, one thing one can say with certainty is that this may be the most serious escalation we have seen thus far in this 14-month war. Would you agree, sir?
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you, Neha, that potentially this has the potential to sort of, veer out of hand, so to say. But I think for its own credibility, Kremlin and Russia should come up with some evidence to incontrovertibly demonstrate that this attack was launched from Ukraine. Because I think there are so many huge gaping holes in their assertion that they have come from Ukraine. Meaning, I find it totally inconceivable to believe that, these drones can travel all these 600 odd kilometers from Ukraine to the Kremlin without being detected. And, they have very sophisticated missile defense systems, which in fact S-400, India is also importing from them. And if their missile defense systems have not been able to detect, then like much of the other equipment that has not really acquitted itself very creditably during the 14 months of war in Ukraine, this would also be seen as not a very effective defense system. So that is number one. Secondly, I think even more importantly, Neha, that Ukraine has always maintained, and I think in the statement also they have stated very clearly, they've always maintained that, their offensive, counter-offensive, etc., is going to be to push back the Russians out of the Ukrainian territory illegally occupied by them. They have said very clearly in the past and even now that it is not their intention to take the war to deep within Russia. And this would be sort of, really going deep within Russia. I think Ukraine's partners, NATO, America, neighbors, Poland, none of them really wants to get involved in a conflict directly with Russia. So they have also been telling Ukraine that they should not take the war into Russia. And that is why this equipment and the weaponry that has been provided to Ukraine is purely of a defensive nature, and its range is also limited, like HIMARS, etc., just up to 80 kilometers, so that it can hit the Russian troops which are on Ukrainian territory, but not beyond that. And even the F-16s and other aircraft that Ukraine has been asking for, they have not been granted. Many of the sophisticated tanks in large numbers have not been given. So I am very skeptical and doubtful that these drones, came from Ukraine. Let more evidence come, and also there are very many disgruntled elements within Russia against Mr. Putin. It could have been the handiwork of some of those also.
Well, you've made some very important and interesting points. You are saying you find it very hard to believe that these drones could have actually come all the way from Ukraine, in a sense evading all the defense systems that Moscow has in place. There are disgruntled elements within Russia whose handiwork this could be. Let me take this across to Major General Bishambar Dayal. Sir, Ukraine has not only denied issuing this attack, they have issued a statement saying that our strategy is purely defensive in nature. We have never attacked targets on Russian territory, and they believe that this is actually Russia preparing a massive attack on Ukraine, and it is likely to use this incident as a pretext, as an excuse to launch a major escalation in this 14-month war. How do you perceive today's developments? There are pictures of smoke billowing above the dome of the Kremlin, even though the building remains undamaged. President Putin remains unharmed, but the Kremlin is calling this an assassination attempt on Putin.
Yeah, firstly, there are a number of points which Ambassador Sajjanar has made, which I think need no more elaboration, because really making an attempt with the help of UAVs all the way from Ukraine up to Kremlin, I think is not possible in today's environment. Though the missile defense system may not be able to detect the span that is there on the radar for a UAV. But there are many other sources on the ground which could have picked up the UAV, because it couldn't be. But there's no doubt that if there's one man today whom not only Ukraine but number of other elements globally would like to see from Russia, out of Russia, is Mr. Putin. So there's no doubt that, and secondly, I don't think Russia, a state like Russia, would orchestrate anything like that just to demonstrate to no point to the world. I mean, to whom? I mean, the West is not their well-wishers, America is not their well-wishers, and to their friends, I don't think they would demonstrate anything like that either to their own public or to the global leadership or to any other country. So there is no doubt, there is a mischief, there is a handiwork. It could well be done from Moscow itself. It could well be done from the Moscow region itself, because the outer defense mechanism which is there of Russia, of Moscow itself, air defense of Moscow, which has a perimeter. So it could well be done from within Moscow itself or the Moscow region itself. Now, Russia does not need any excuse to escalate the war in Ukraine. The war is already on. Russia has very clearly stated. And if Russia was to do anything like this to the President Palace in Kyiv, then they would have started the war from there. No, they did not start the war from there. If they could go to outer periphery of the Kyiv in the very first few days with their specialized forces, with their airborne troops, then I'm sure they could have done something to the President Palace and the government, the center of Ukraine. They never did anything like that. So I think these are all as far as Ukrainian statements are concerned, they are, I think, more of a cover-up. But there is certainly an attempt must have been done. Whether these elements have come from the rogue elements of Ukraine, rogue elements of any other country, or some regime has orchestrated that against Mr. Putin, well, that is yet to come out. I mean, some few details will come out. But I'm of the opinion Russia as a state will not do anything like this to dramatize the war. Russia as a state will not indulge in all this because it doesn't suit President Putin's either persona or personality or the might of the state. And Russia does not need an excuse to escalate war. The war is on. The war is on. Russia is not only fighting Ukraine, Russia is fighting in Ukraine. NATO, Russia is fighting in Ukraine. America, Russia is fighting a war which is being driven not only by Ukrainian people or Ukrainian armed forces, but NATO and America together.
Okay.
So wholesomely, let's look at it like this, that what will come out of it? There's no doubt Russia will have to rethink a number of issues. Firstly, the present war which is going on is almost a skirmish, a stalemate. It's like the war which was going on in Syria a few years back, right? So the war has come to a point where Russia needs a decisive punch. Whether Ukraine will draw this punch first and throw out Russians from there, or Russia will draw a punch first and will drive a little deeper so that, he creates a buffer zone between Donbas region and Ukraine. So let's see. It's a war which is going on. It's war which is being supported completely by the West, weaponized by the West, aided by the West, supported by the West. People are being trained by the West and between Russia.
Point taken. But, even though at this point we don't know who is behind today's incident, this drone attack that's been alleged, but, with due respect, Major General Dayal, when you say that, President Putin would not resort to these kind of tactics because it does not suit his persona, the war is already on, he does not need a pretext. Fact of the matter is, there have been multiple occasions in the past when Putin and Russia have been accused of deploying dirty tactics, using, all sorts of pretexts to escalate the war. So, I am not sure that, one should really be taking such a charitable view of Moscow's role over the last 14 months. But let me now go across to Group Captain VN Jha at this point. Group Captain VN Jha, what do you make, sir, of these developments? Russia says this was a planned terror operation, this was an assassination attempt on the life of President Putin. We reserve the right to retaliate as we deem fit. In fact, there are now reports suggesting that Russian parliament wants the Kremlin to launch an attack on Ukrainian President Zelensky's residence. On the other hand, Kiev, while issuing a denial, has said it is Russia which is preparing for a major offensive and is probably going to use this incident to justify that escalation. And Ukraine maintains their war strategy is purely defensive in nature. They do not attack targets on Russian territory. How do you see these developments? We don't know who is behind this.
Well, Neha, to be very frank, right now, as it appears in your TV, situation is very, very confusing, because I also feel that Putin doesn't have to mount such attack on his own premise to prove something, because he doesn't have to prove anything. If he has to launch attack on Kiev or anywhere, he has earlier launched and he can again launch. It can be a gruesome attack. As far as the narrative for any substantive, maybe father of all bombs, maybe nuclear, if it is taken, Putin has already narrated that he has got everything on his table to use. So all those things have already been there in the past. So Putin doesn't have to prove anything onto this. But there is an informative here. There is an optics here. As we can see on your TV, from the Air Force, I can tell you that this particular drone, which has hit the mast of the flag, is not of the sort which will cause massive damage of a Kremlin. Whether it can be a homicide attack by Ukraine launched onto President Putin within his complex. But remember, earlier in the past, Ukraine had launched such attacks of the drone, which has traveled 450, 500 kilometers. The air base of Kush and Angel, that has been attacked. That is almost about 380 miles away from the Ukrainian border, and that has been hit with a substantial damage to the airport and the aircraft standing there. So that capability is there in the Ukraine. It is very much there. It could be an optics also, that we can hit you, because there have been holes in the air defense system of Russia that we know. That is how Belgorod fuel depot has in the past been hit. Belgorod refinery has been hit in June 22. Crimea ammunition depot has been hit in the Sati air base.
And the Crimean Bridge.
Absolutely. The attack on the Kerch Strait. And all these attacks within the Russian territory have attacked. And what I'm insisting, I'm making a point very clear, that as far as 500 kilometers, 550 kilometers, these drones have gone and hit the Russian air base. So capability is there. Now, another thing. Now, Zelensky has narrated in the past that now he is going to launch the attack onto Russian soil. He has made just, few days back, he has made such statement. So that having been there, now this particular drone, I see is a small drone. It has struck the mast and broken into, and a very, very small flash has come. Obviously, it doesn't have the type of explosive that you need to have to blow up a building like Kremlin, where President Putin may be sitting there. It is not that. It is surely not the homicidal attack onto Putin, but it is a posturing. It is denoting many other things that there is a hole in your air defense. I can send my say planes or drones deep within Russia, which will not be detected by your radar system. Thirdly, that your air defense may be absolutely of no use to you. If we want to launch this attack, we can launch this. So all this posting is there. And last, Putin also may be trying something. You know, if he has to launch a attack, something like father of all bombs or a nuclear attack, he possibly needs a red flag. You know, earlier, America has been blaming Russia that before the beginning of the war on 24th February, many red flagging has been there by Russian forces. So all those allegations, counter allegations have been there, but this is right now, as I see, there is all sort of possibilities, but it is not mounted. This particular attack has not been mounted by anyone anti-Kremlin. If at all, it could be pro-Kremlin to prove that there was an attack. But this particular drone is a very small drone. I absolutely rubbish it that it has got any tendency, any capability to mount the type of damage that it has meant to be for a homicidal attack.
Okay, interesting. You are saying this could simply be a message that is being sent out to the Kremlin. This may not have really been intended to be an assassination attempt on President Putin. In fact, according to the Kremlin's own statement, no major damage has been done to the Kremlin building. Putin is unharmed. He was not even on the premises at the time of this alleged attack. However, there is absolutely no clarity on where these drones came from. Ambassador Sajanhar believes that it is virtually impossible for Kiev to have the capability to launch these kind of drones all the way across to attack Kremlin on Russian soil. It does not have the capability, and that too in the process evading detection by Moscow's missile defense systems. There are those who believe, well, Ukraine does have the capabilities, because let's not forget that it has been heavily armed by NATO. But let me now focus on a larger issue, Ambassador Sajanhar, and I'm coming back to you at this point, sir. Let's face it, none of us really at the moment are in a position to determine who is behind this attack and what the motive behind this attack is. It is really a fog of war that we're dealing with little or no clarity as to exactly what went down. But the bigger question is, what ramifications is this incident likely to have? Are we likely to see a very serious escalation in this 14-month war, given that the Kremlin insists this was an assassination attempt on Putin? And let's not forget that almost since the beginning of this war, or at least for the last several months, Putin has time and again held out the nuclear threat over not just Ukraine but NATO. Every time the United States or another member of NATO has talked about sending more weapons to Ukraine, every time they've talked about sending the Patriot missile systems or the F-16s, Russia has said it will be nothing but an act of war on part of NATO, and it will have serious consequences. And Putin has in fact not been subtle in issuing nuclear threats.
No, you are very right, Neha, in all the points that you make. And the fact that these nuclear threats were being made not recently, but they started just around the time that the aggression against Ukraine had started. So, this really smacks of both frustration and desperation as far as Russia is concerned, because it has not been able to meet its objectives. 14 months still going, and even the four provinces that it said in last September that they are a part of Russia, they have not been able to completely claim and control those provinces. So obviously, as far as Russia's standing is concerned, that has suffered a huge dent both in amongst its own partners And, even as far as China is concerned, it is seen as having sort of, significantly degraded its own position. I don't think that, when we are talking about the attack on the Crimean Bridge, that, of course, Ukraine doesn't take that to be Russian territory. It is taken to be the Ukrainian territory, so it has full rights to sort of, attack that.
And there were celebrations in Ukraine when that attack occurred. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not surprised that there were celebrations, although I don't know whether that was claimed also or not, that it was
not directly. No, directly it was never claimed by Kiev.
Never claimed. But yes, of course, there was this sense of jubilation that was expressed. But, coming to your point, as far as the implications, I think the implications can be very, very serious. I think you look at the manner in which, and this is what we have been talking about over the last 14 months, that the escalation could take place due to an accident, unintentional accident or whatever. And it could escalate, and if Russia, I think it has really used all the power, it had all the firepower, the missiles, the aircrafts, the shelling of areas of residential areas, and completely razing the infrastructure, electricity lines, water, basically to the ground. So it has really done all that it could. I don't know what more it could do. There have been some suggestions that the street on which President Zelensky's bunker or headquarters are located, that could come under attack. The center of Kiev, which has such beautiful buildings, that could come under attack. But this would really be, what Russia would be doing is hitting its own origins, because the center of Kiev is the place from where Russia originated 850 years ago, or about 1,000 years ago. So Russia would really be hitting itself, its own heritage, its own place from where it all started. And I don't know whether it would like to do that. But definitely it would like to demonstrate both to its own people, more importantly to its own people, as also to the outside world and to Ukraine, that this is a direct attack, this is a direct threat, and it will not be taken lightly. But I think Kremlin needs to come out with very strong evidence that this has something to do with Ukraine.
I think that's a very valid point. Is Kremlin going to present solid evidence before the international community linking Kiev to this attack? Because when they say this is an assassination attempt on our president, it is a very serious charge, serious enough to merit a strong retaliatory response from Moscow, and who knows what that might entail. And that is the real worry here, Major General Bishambar Dayal. Forget for a moment, sir, about who may be behind this particular incident. We have no clarity. There are too many questions, no answers available at the moment. But let's look ahead. Let's look at the ramifications this could have. Ambassador Sajjan Hart says this could have very serious implications. I have said earlier that, Vladimir Putin has not been subtle in issuing nuclear threats ever since the invasion of Ukraine began in February of 2022. Now, could we actually have a situation where there is even a remote possibility of some sort of a nuclear attack by Russia, given that they're claiming that their president, no less, was the target of this alleged drone attack? And could we see in the days ahead NATO, in a sense, getting sucked into this war? Because so far, even though Russia says this is NATO's war, that Ukraine is fighting, it's a proxy war. But fact of the matter is that NATO has stayed away militarily so far, only offering assistance to Ukraine. Could that change with the developments such as today's?
Yeah, firstly, let me put one thing in a clear perspective, that for us to say that we really don't know who did it, how it happened, Russians will get into the depth of it. We must understand this is an attack on Kremlin. Moscow's air defense is one of the most well organized, well set air defense. I mean, it's not a peripheral town of Russia. It's not around Crimea. It's not around. It's not in the west of Russia. It is a attack has come on Kremlin. That means Moscow's air defense has been breached. So it is not, to my mind, it is not any handiwork of anything coming. But yes, covert elements may have launched a small UAVs from the Moscow region itself, taking all these things in view. And believe you me, there will be no nuclear war. President Putin has never directly threatened West or NATO with any nuclear. He just said if Russia's existence will be at any stage, will be at stake, then we will use nuclear. He never said we will use nuclear.
So that is a threat. I beg to differ, sir. When you say every few weeks that we will use every means at our disposal, that is a nuclear threat, sir. And Putin has said that not once but multiple times. I mean, you know, you're taking a very charitable view of Moscow and Putin, but I don't think anybody would agree, sir, that he has not issued nuclear threats. I think he has on multiple occasions.
No, whenever he has visited his nuclear facilities, whenever he has put them on alarm, whenever he has mobilized those resources, everybody has construed the meaning that he is going for a nuclear. President Putin has never issued a nuclear threat or a warning to NATO or to anybody. They will not. I mean, it's not a banana state. They may not have succeeded in their objective in these last 14 months. But we don't know what was their plot, what was their plan. And one thing, let me tell you, they will not go for, like Ambassador Sarjanar said, I don't think he will ever attack the center of Kyiv. If that time they could go to Hostomel airfield, completely take over the airfield, then believe you me, taking the presidential palace and that area at the start of the war was not at all difficult. Their aim is not that. Their objective is not that. The world is more confused than anybody else about what actually their objective is. Maybe they are prolonging the war. Maybe they will tire the West. Maybe they will tire NATO. Russians have lived in a very small bowl. I always say Russians can has a more resistance than the West. But yes, as far as this attack is concerned, it's a serious thing. But not that tomorrow they will come out with a nuclear this thing. No, war is already there. They are fighting the war. When he started the war, he did not mince his word. He said, we will attack, and he attacked. President Putin, whatever he has said, if you go by his address to the nation on 24th, before he launched the attack, he made it very clear. I mean, he didn't leave mince any words. So the war is there. I mean, they have objectives. They have not been able to achieve them. But it does not mean that Russia will go nuclear because of this. But yes,
you know, I am not being alarmist, sir, and I'm not suggesting that there is going to be a nuclear war tomorrow. But with due respect, when you say that this is not a banana republic, let me remind you and the viewers, sir, that this is a dictator who, in order to teach NATO a lesson, invaded an entire country, killed thousands, butchered thousands of its citizens, including women and children, and annexed large parts of Ukrainian territory, held sham referendums, and then claimed that this was all part of Russian territory and all he was doing was liberating Ukraine and liberating the Ukrainian people, when we all know it's nothing but a gross and brazen violation of the integrity and sovereignty of an independent country. When you have such evidence before you and when you know that the man has repeatedly issued nuclear threats, I think it would be a little hard to say that it is not a banana republic that we are talking about, with all due respect, sir. But Group Captain V.N. Jha, like I said, I don't want to be alarmist. I'm not saying Putin is going to launch a nuclear attack tomorrow, but we do know he has constantly held out the nuclear threat to keep NATO in check, to ensure that Ukraine does not get membership of NATO. Going ahead, sir, what do you think could be the result of today's incident? Because Russia has already vowed to take retaliatory action. How do you see this panning out?
Well, Neha, if it is a Ukrainian drone if it has reached, Kremlin. From tomorrow, there is a parade going to start for the, for many days now, culminating finally into the affair when many of the people will be there as a guest and President himself will be there. So it messages that everyone is now being threatened. If the drone can reach there, it can reach the parade ground as well. But you prompted some of the words that had come to my mind to General Dayal. Compare when US had attacked Japan, what were the circumstances? We are actually on the same platform. The objective of US was not being met of their war. That was one. Here also, Putin's objective is not being met. US had incurred huge losses of both men and machine. Here also, Russia has incurred huge losses of
I
its
agree
men
with you,
and
sir.
machines.
In fact, according to many estimates, Russia has lost well over 1 lakh soldiers since it launched this invasion of Ukraine. More than a year ago, it's lost more than 1 lakh of its men.
We may not trust those reports which is coming from the Western media. It is exaggeration. But remember, US was also affected with the kamikaze attack by the aeroplanes of Japan, Pearl Harbor and many other you already know. Here also, Ukraine is now mounting those kamikaze drones. I already told you that Belgorod has been hit, Crimea has been hit, and much within Russian territory, those two airports have been hit. So kamikaze drones are hitting Russia. And you remember what was President Truman's temperament and what is President Putin's temperament? Almost matching. So all the circumstances that had been there, President Truman was also advised by his Blue Ribbon Committee to use nuclear bomb. President Security Council also has already advised almost about 5 months back that he may opt to choose the nuclear button. So all these are there.
Okay.
The situation is right. Now, whether this is posturing by Ukraine or it is posturing by President Putin or his...
But either way, it does look alarming because we don't know what will come next. As I keep saying, the Kremlin has already vowed revenge. They are saying there's going to be a retaliatory action. What could that action entail remains the million-dollar question. Let's certainly hope that the nuclear button is not pressed. Ambassador Sajanhar, I'll give you the last word, sir, as we wrap up this discussion. Okay, Ambassador Sajanhar has left. Major General Bishambar Dayal, sir, wrap up this discussion for us. The simple question I want to ask you is, how is NATO likely to react to today's developments?
Yeah, NATO is arming Ukraine and will continue to arm Ukraine. NATO's population will be scared after this because this all over the world will go that probably President Putin will now take a nuclear action. He may carry out a nuclear strike. So in NATO's population will be more scared. There'll be a psychological pressure there. But let me tell you very clearly, I don't think there'll be any nuclear initiative by Russia ever in this war. We must understand what the war is all about, why it is being fought, and Russia is not going to press anything in Ukraine which will be nuclear.
Okay.
The two countries are too close. I mean, if you fire a nuclear at Lahore, you must remember that our own Amritsar is affected. So this will not happen. But yes, war will escalate. Summer is come. It will escalate. And like I said, whether Russia puts the first punch or Ukraine put the first punch is everybody's guesswork. To my mind, Russia does not have the troops on ground to have that sort of a strike. So they will continue to threaten and strike with missiles, long-range missiles. That's the way.
Okay, and those missile strikes have gone on for very long now. You are saying that there will certainly be an escalation, but you do not believe that there will be any nuclear strike. Let's certainly hope good sense prevails and there is no serious escalation and certainly no nuclear strikes. But what happens next is anybody's guess. The situation is very tense. The Kremlin has vowed retaliatory action against Kiev, even though Kiev denies any involvement in this alleged drone attack. President Putin is unharmed. No major damage reported to the Kremlin, but clearly the optics of the dome of the Kremlin and the presidential palace on fire are very, very strong and send out a very powerful message. What happens next remains the million-dollar question. How is Russia going to react? How is Kiev going to react? And how is the West going to react to today's big development, which is being seen as one of the most serious escalations in the 14-month war between Russia and Ukraine. This is a story we'll continue to track very closely here on News 9. For now, it's a wrap on the show. Thank you to all our guests and thanks to the viewers for watching.